The scanner wand stopped on his left palm and did not move on. I had run 417 intake scans that morning. The *Kerveth crossing * was 3 days out of the Pellary transit corridor with a full refugee manifest, dock workers, farm families, a school group from one of the outer agri stations that had come apart when the Vethrani Compact reclassified its resource designation and pulled the subsidy. Standard humanitarian intake. The medical bay ran bright and cold under the overhead panels, white light bouncing off the polymer decking, and the Vethrani processing queue stretched back through the hatch and down the corridor for as far as I could see. 211 souls waiting to be classified, catalogued, and assigned a bunk number. I was the human medical liaison because the compact required one on mixed species intakes, and what that meant in practice was that I ran the scanner, called anomalies to the Vethrani senior cataloger, and otherwise stayed out of the way. The man whose palm stopped the wand was named Sorrel. He was broad-shouldered, maybe 50, with calloused hands and the look of someone who had been loading freight for 30 years and intended to load it for 30 more if anyone would let him. He had come through the biometric station, the respiratory station, the fluid assay station, and he had said nothing at any of them. When I told him to hold out both hands, palm up, he did it without comment. Left hand, right hand, standard epidermal survey, looking for infection markers, chemical burns, contact dermatitis, the usual freight handle inventory. The wand passed over his right hand in 4 seconds and logged it clean. It passed over the heel of his left hand, the wrist, the base of the fingers, and then it reached the center of the palm and stopped. Not a calibration pause. The wand had its own alert register, a small haptic pulse when it flagged something for review. What it did on Sorrel's palm was different. It simply held position. The progress bar on my display froze at 61%. The wand did not pulse. It did not log a partial result. It waited. I moved it manually. It logged the remaining survey area in 3 seconds and completed the scan. Then it returned, autonomously, to the same coordinate on his palm and stopped again. I looked at his hand properly for the first time. The scar was old. 10 years at least, maybe more. The tissue had finished its remodeling, gone pale and smooth against the darker skin around it. It sat in the center of the palm, roughly the size of a 50 credit coin, and its shape was not random. I have seen lightning burns before. I did a stretch at a field station on Kethavar for where the storm season runs 8 months a year, and I have seen what a discharge does to skin when it grounds through the body, the feathering, the branching, the Lichtenberg figures that spread out from the entry point like a river delta drawn in scar tissue. They are never the same twice, and they are never simple. This one was a fist. Not approximate. Not suggestive. A closed fist, 4 fingers folded over a thumb, the knuckle ridges raised slightly in the old scar tissue, the proportion exactly human. It sat in the center of his palm as though someone had pressed a brand there, except no brand makes that shape and no brand heals that cleanly. The wand was sitting over it like a dog that had found something buried and did not know whether to bark. "Sir," I said, "I need to flag your left hand for the senior cataloger. It'll add some time to your processing." Sorrel looked at his palm. Then he looked at me. "The hand," he said. Not a question. "The hand." He nodded once and stepped to the side of the line. Senior cataloger Vetharasan arrived in 8 minutes. The Vethrani are not an expressive species. Their face structure runs to stillness, the brow ridge fixed, the secondary eyelid mostly at rest, but I had worked alongside Vetharasan for 6 weeks and I knew his registers. He looked at the wand's frozen display, he looked at the coordinate data, he looked at Sorrel's palm, and then he looked at me with the particular quality of attention that, in a Vethrani, means something has moved out of the category of *routine* and into the category of * requires documentation star. He ran his own scanner. A more sensitive unit than mine, the full compact medical survey array, the kind that classifies tissue at the cellular level and cross-references against the compact biological archive, 11 million species, 400 years of continuous cataloguing. He ran it twice. He called up the archive on his display and ran a parallel search while the scanner was still active, which I had never seen him do before. The result came back the same both times. Epidermal and dermal tissue, human, standard. Scar tissue composition, human, standard. Scar geometry, consistent with high-energy electrical discharge, direct contact or near contact, estimated duration sub-second. Origin event classification, unresolved. Cross-reference, 0 matches in compact biological archive. Then, below that, a secondary flag I had not seen the scanner generate before, a notation the archive appended when it could identify the tissue response but not the cause. Asterisk tissue response pattern, consistent with postmortem resilience cascade. Subject status, living. Asterisk. I read it twice. Vetharasan read it, and his secondary eyelid came fully open, which on a Vethrani is the equivalent of taking a step back. Postmortem resilience cascade is the term the compact uses for what happens to tissue when the organism has technically ceased primary vital function and the body's secondary systems activate in response. It is a documented phenomenon in 11 species. It does not happen in humans. It does not happen in humans because the cascade requires a specific redundancy in the autonomic architecture that human biology does not carry. The body would need to have a fallback system that activates when the primary system fails, and human bodies do not have that fallback. We are single thread in that respect. When the primary thread cuts, that is the end. Except that the scanner was looking at the healed result of exactly that process in the palm of a man who was standing in front of us eating a nutrition wafer and waiting patiently for us to finish. Vetharasan pulled a third consult. He queried the archive specifically for electrical discharge events that produced postmortem resilience cascades in species that did not carry the redundant architecture. The archive returned 0 results, and then, after a processing pause that was longer than any archive pause I had seen, it returned a secondary notation. Asterisk query parameters describe a theoretically non-viable biological event. No archive entry exists because no organism without redundant autonomic architecture has been recorded surviving the origin event category described. Asterisk. Then the display held. The scanner stayed active, its progress bar full, its result locked on the screen. It had done everything it was built to do. It had found the edge of what it knew and it had stopped there, cleanly, without pretending there was more. Vetharasan turned to Sorrel. In 31 years of compact service, he had told me this once, in the particular way Vethrani share information, as a statement of inventory rather than conversation. He had never initiated a secondary interview on a refugee intake. The scanner classified. The scanner's result was the record. He had not needed to ask a subject anything in 31 years. The scar on your left hand, he said. His translator rendered it in standard compact lingua. Please describe the origin event. Sorrel finished his nutrition wafer. He folded the wrapper with the same care he had probably given every task for 50 years. The fold tight, the edges aligned, and he put it in his pocket. I was 9, he said, working the agri-fields with my father. Late season, the sky came up fast. He told me to run for the equipment shed and I ran. I was 20 meters out when it came down. He looked at his palm. Direct strike. My father told me later that I was dead for. He said it differently. He said I was gone. He said I was on the ground and not breathing and he ran to me and I came back. He closed his hand and opened it again. I woke up with the scar. The village medic said she had never seen a person walk away from a direct strike. She documented it. I don't know if that documentation still exists. He said it the way you describe something that happened to someone else and that you have been describing, matter-of-factly, for 40 years whenever someone stops on the scar. No drama. No ownership of it. It had happened to him the way weather happens. It came down, it did what it did, and he was still here. Vetharasan stood for a moment with his display in his hands. I had expected. I don't know what I had expected. Another query. A request to escalate to the medical officer. Some procedural mechanism that would absorb the result and route it somewhere the archive could eventually file it. That is what classification systems do. They find the nearest category and they apply it. Because the alternative is to leave a field blank and the Vethrani compact does not leave fields blank. What he did instead was open a new archive entry. I watched him key it in. A primary field designation, asterisk origin event, direct atmospheric electrical discharge, single strike, full grounding through subject. Asterisk a secondary field, asterisk subject survival, confirmed. Scar tissue consistent with postmortem resilience cascade in organism without documented redundant autonomic architecture. Asterisk a tertiary field, the one the compact uses for events that fall outside existing categories, asterisk classification, first recorded instance. Archive entry opened, this date. Subject, Sorrel, family name on file. Species, human. Asterisk. He saved the entry. The archive accepted it. The scanner's display updated. The unresolved flag cleared, replaced with a case number and the new entry designation, and then held there, the way the wand had held over the palm, steady and complete, not moving on. 210 people were still waiting in the corridor. Vetharasan handed Sorrel his intake clearance chit. "You are processed," he said. "Bunk assignment will be delivered to your chit within the hour." Sorrel looked at the chit. Then he looked at the display, his case number sitting at the top of a new archive entry, the only entry of its kind in 400 years of compact cataloguing, and he looked at it the way he had looked at his palm. Not with pride. Not with wonder, exactly. With the same patient recognition he probably gave every scar. He pocketed the chit and walked toward the bunk corridor. I stood at my station and looked at the display. The scanner was ready for the next subject. The case number sat in the top line of the archive. First recorded instance, human, living, and the rest of the entry stretched below it with all its fields filled and nothing left unresolved. Outside the medical bay, the corridor was full of people who had come through lightning and drought and reclassification and the slow collapse of the places they had built their lives, and they were waiting, and they were still here. I called the next number.